On the afternoon of March 3rd, 2008, Grand Rapids, Michigan, was waking from winter. Patches of slush clung to the sidewalks, and the wind still held its late-season chill. Students at Bellevue High were spilling out onto the street just before 3 o'clock, heads down, coats zipped, backpacks slung over shoulders. Emily Price, 15 years old, walked the same route home as she always had, past the corner deli, across Kensington Avenue, and down the long stretch of Ashford Road where the Billboard stood. The billboards towered silently over that part of town, anchored in concrete and rusting steel. Most showed bright, rotating ads for car dealerships or grocery stores, but the one at the bend of Ashford never changed. For years, it had featured the same faded ad for a bankruptcy attorney. Locals barely noticed it anymore. It just sat there, static and weather-stained. Emily passed under it every day. She was in 10th grade, smart, introverted, always drawing the margins of her notebooks. Teachers said she was kind, observant, often quiet, but never disconnected. Her best friend, Tara, described her as the type who noticed everything but said nothing until you asked. On the day she disappeared, she wore a navy hoodie, jeans, and her worn-out Converse. Her phone, a silver flip model, was in her jacket pocket when she left school. Her backpack was over one shoulder, filled with textbooks, a math notebook, and a nearly finished sketch pad. She never arrived home. Her mother called the school first, assuming Emily had stayed late. Then Tara's house. Then a neighbor's. By 5:30, panic had set in. By 6, police were notified. Officers began tracing her route. The walk from Bellevue High to Emily's house was under 15 minutes. All sidewalks, no wooded shortcuts, no known blind spots. The only stretch with reduced visibility was a curve on the Billboard, where the sidewalk dipped slightly behind a chain-link fence. There were no traffic cameras along that route in 2008. Surveillance footage from nearby businesses showed nothing useful. No witnesses recalled seeing her after the school's front lawn. Her phone was never used again. The backpack was never found. No footprints led away from the road. No articles of clothing were recovered. No signs of struggle. Just silence. The investigation began immediately. Police canvassed homes, questioned classmates, checked attendance records, even interviewed passing drivers who regularly used Ashford Road. Local volunteers combed the surrounding blocks, alleyways, and empty lots. But nothing turned up. By the end of the week, local news began calling it the vanishing with no shadow. No drop binder. No scuff marks. Not even tire tracks out of place. Just a girl who walked out of school and didn't walk anywhere else. Emily's disappearance rattled Grand Rapids in a quiet, lasting way. It wasn't just that she was young. It was that her absence came without reason, without moment. In towns used to cause and effect, hers felt like a moment that refused a finish. The theories began almost immediately. Some believed she was abducted by someone in a passing car. Others suspected she had run away, though her friends and family rejected that possibility completely. Emily had made weekend plans. Her journal, recovered from her bedroom, contained drawings, homework reminders, and no mention of anything troubling. She had no history of discipline issues, no known online accounts under false names, no secret boyfriend, no record of therapy, prescriptions, or behavioral concerns. Her life was, by all accounts, unremarkable and peaceful. But after that Monday, she was simply gone. The search lasted months. Billboards posted her photo, including the one on Ashford Road she had passed under. Ironically, it became the first billboard in town to display her face. Flyers went up across Michigan. A candlelight vigil was held on the 1-year anniversary at Bellevue High, where teachers read from her old essays. Her best friend Tara spoke softly to a crowd of classmates, her voice shaking as she described their last conversation. A joke about a pop quiz and plans to watch a movie that weekend. In the years that followed, Emily's case joined a quiet backlog of unresolved files. A new detective picked it up every few years, reviewed notes, and moved on. Tips trickled in occasionally, none credible, none verifiable. The image of her smile, her gray hoodie, and her sketchpad became part of a growing collage of missing youth in Michigan. Parents remembered. Her school kept a bench with her name etched into the side. But time passed. By 2018, Emily Price had been missing for 10 years. Her file was still marked active, though no new leads had emerged in nearly 6. That's when 2 contractors were sent to dismantle the old bankruptcy at Billboard on Ashford Road. The structure had been scheduled for removal and replacement. The steel supports, once painted black, had faded to mottled brown. When the men climbed up the scaffold behind the panel, they found something unexpected wedged between the metal framework and the rear access ladder. It was a backpack, wrapped in layers of black plastic and insulation foam, tightly bound with faded duct tape. They assumed it was trash. A sleeping bag, maybe. But when they cut the wrapping and saw the faded cloth with pins and hand-drawn patches, they paused. Inside, 2 school textbooks with the Bellevue High stamp, a sketch pad with graphite portraits, a pencil case with Emily's name in block letters, and several loose sheets of paper. Some were handwritten. Some were clipped from newspapers. The contractors didn't know who Emily Price was. Neither had grown up in Grand Rapids. But when one of them picked up the sketch pad and saw the name printed on a notebook, E. Price, something fell off. The bag wasn't covered in dust or mold. The plastic wrapping had held, keeping out most of the moisture. The items inside, though aged, were remarkably well preserved. That same afternoon, the crew foreman called the local authorities. A patrol car arrived within 20 minutes. The responding officer opened the backpack on the hood of his vehicle, gloved hands turning over items one by one. 2 textbooks, English and biology, both dated 2007. A pencil case with neatly arranged mechanical pencils. A folded student schedule. Several loose sketches. One of a girl sitting under a tree, another of a billboard with no advertisement. The last page showed a series of symbols drawn in repeated patterns, almost like designs or codes. But it was a bundle of newspaper clippings that changed everything. There were 6 in total, all yellowed, folded carefully, and sealed in a sandwich bag. Each article described a missing person, all teenager from towns within a few hundred miles of Grand Rapids. The dates range from 1996 to 2005. For boys, 2 girls. Most had vanished on or near their way home from school. The articles were standard, local coverage, photos, quotes from families. But the presence of those clippings, stored with such care, implied something disturbing. Why would a 15-year-old girl have saved newspaper articles about other teens who had gone missing? Emily's parents were contacted immediately. When shown photos of the items, her mother identified the backpack as Emily's without hesitation. She recognized the sketchbook, the handwriting, even the pins on the front pocket, one shaped like a cassette tape, another with a cartoon pencil. It was hers. The discovery reignited interest in the case. The backpack was sent to the Michigan State Police Forensic Lab. Despite the decade that had passed, they were able to extract partial fingerprints from the plastic wrapping and interior objects. Most matched Emily. One print, faint incomplete, did not. It was too degraded to identify, but was preserved for reference. There was no DNA evidence of other individuals. No blood, no hair, no fibers out of place. The billboard structure itself had seen only basic maintenance over the years. It had never been replaced or fully disassembled until that moment. The rear scaffold was largely out of sight and difficult to reach. Investigators concluded that whoever placed a backpack there had used the rear ladder and hidden it with the intent that it would not be found unless the entire billboard was removed, which, for 10 years, it wasn't. The questions multiplied. Had Emily placed it there herself? Unlikely. The structure was high, exposed, and difficult to access for a girl her size. The wrapping and insulation suggested someone methodical, someone thinking long-term. It was carefully hidden, not tossed or forgotten. But then why keep it? And why include those articles? Was it a message, a warning, or something more obscure, a personal ritual, a collection of relevance only to the person who hid it? Detectives reopened not just Emily's case, but began reviewing the 6 disappearances mentioned in the clippings. 3 had been solved, tragic accidents or confirmed runaways. 2 were still open. 1 had been classified as a likely abduction, but had never led to an arrest. None had direct ties to Grand Rapids. And none, at first glance, had anything to do with Emily Price. But a pattern began to emerge. In each of the articles, there was a mention, often small, of a missing item, a bag, a notebook, a binder, personal items never found with the victims. In Emily's case, her backpack had been the one missing piece. Now, it had surfaced in a location that no one had ever searched or even considered, a billboard, a steel skeleton holding up advertisements over a suburban sidewalk. Investigators theorized that the person who took Emily, if that's what happened, may have been someone who collected, not trophies in the traditional sense, but stories, cases, patterns, or someone who believed they were curating something, building a personal archive of loss quietly in a place no one would look. The plastic wrap, the insulation, the sealed newspaper clippings. It all felt intentional and cold. Tara, Emily's best friend, now 25, returned to Grand Rapids for the first time in years. She sat for an interview with a local journalist who asked her what she made of the backpack. She looked off camera for a moment, then said, Emily wasn't the kind of person who studied tragedies. She didn't follow crime stories. I don't think she collected those articles. I think someone was collecting her. The phrase echoed across social media. Someone was collecting her. The phrase struck a chord. Other families reached out to police, wondering if their child's disappearance might be connected. None of those claims led to anything concrete, but the mood in Grand Rapids shifted again, back to tension, back to fear. The Billboard site became a memorial overnight. People placed flowers, candles, drawings, some Emily had made, laminated and taped to the rusted base. Someone left 6 more clippings. Anonymous, unlabeled. Within 2 weeks, the city moved to install a permanent plaque at the site, not just for Emily, but for the unnamed and unresolved. The police, meanwhile, built a new task group, a quiet one, low profile, assigned to review unsolved disappearances across the region with similar characteristics. Minimal evidence, missing personal items, last seen during school hours. The backpack had not answered the question, but it had reopened it. And this time, more people were listening. After the discovery of Emily's backpack behind the old billboard, the atmosphere in Grand Rapids took on a new stillness. Not the quiet grief, but of recalibration. The kind that follows the return of a missing piece. Too late to explain everything, but too important to ignore. Detective Lena Harrow, newly assigned to the revived task force, sat in a room filled with paper. Dozens of case files, most over a decade old, lined the conference table. They weren't just from Michigan. They had come from Indiana, Ohio, and even as far as Illinois. Each file had one thing in common: a missing teenager whose disappearance occurred near a school or walking route, with a personal belonging never recovered. At first, the pattern seemed loose, scattered, but then came the timelines. Emily's case, dated March of 2008, lined up exactly 10 years after one of the clippings found in her backpack, the 1998 case of Jeremy Caldwell, a 16-year-old from Kalamazoo who vanished on his walk from a youth center. His backpack was also never found. The article included in Emily's belongings was clipped directly from the Kalamazoo Gazette, its edges worn but preserved. The clipping about Jeremy had 2 words underlined in blue pen: routine walk. Emily's path from Bellevue High had also been a routine walk. Detective Harrow started mapping the remaining clippings. Each one followed a similar formula: a teenager, alone, after school or after an extracurricular activity, on foot, in a quiet zone with low surveillance. One had disappeared outside a library, another outside a community pool, Always alone. Always in the liminal space between public visibility and private return. What struck Harrow was not just a similarity in setting, but the nature of what was missing. Backpacks, journals, small containers, things that carried something of the person. And with Emily, someone had returned it, not left it randomly, not discarded it in a field or river, hidden it carefully, deliberately. The insulation foam used to wrap the backpack had one specific brand marking. A faded strip of label read, ThermoGuard M5, lot number 3902. It was a type of lining used in older residential water heaters, common in houses built before 1990. Detectives tracked local suppliers. One recalled selling surplus rolls to a private buyer in 2017, a cash purchase, no name, but the buyer had asked whether the material could resist moisture for several years if kept sealed. The transaction had seemed odd, but not criminal. Still, it was the first tangible clue pointing to someone actively involved in storing the backpack intentionally and doing so with long-term concealment in mind. That was the most unsettling part. This wasn't panic. This wasn't someone discarding evidence. It was preservation. Detectives revisited the Billboard site with a forensic team. This time, they examined every bolt, every beam. In one of the upper corners of the structure's frame, they found faint etchings, lines, almost like markings made with a dull blade. Closer analysis showed initials. Faint, but there. EP. And beside them, 3308. The exact date Emily vanished. The height of the marking suggested it hadn't been made by her, not unless she had climbed the rear of the billboard alone, which seemed improbable for a teenager without climbing experience. So then who had carved it? And why? Was it a marker? A timestamp? A tribute? Or something ritualistic? Emily's sketches, recovered from the backpack, were sent to a handwriting analyst. While the majority matched her known writing, a few symbols, the ones resembling abstract codes, appeared rushed, uneven, not consistent with the smooth, practiced lines in her journals from home. The expert couldn't say with certainty whether those markings had been hers. They looked almost taught, copied, as if she'd been shown them or asked to replicate them. Meanwhile, her friend Tara reviewed the contents again. She recognized the drawings of trees and faces, but the symbols were unfamiliar. One page, she said, wasn't Emily's style. It had no shading, no depth, just 5 small boxes in a row, each containing a different object. A shoe, a notebook, a clock, a billboard, and a blank space. The last box was empty, no label, no drawing. Detective Harrow believed it wasn't random. Each object seemed to reference something missing in the case. The shoe, one from a 1998 case. The notebook, another teen's journal from the 2001 file. The clock, time missing from surveillance footage. The billboard, Emily's own. And the empty space? The final piece yet to come. The team called it the sequence page. What no one could explain was how Emily would have known about those other cases. They were from different cities, different years, different papers, unless someone showed her. Someone who had studied the pattern. Someone who had made it. There were theories now, not just of an abduction, but of a process. A person not driven by impulse, but by documentation. Someone who observed, waited, and marked. The billboard might not have been chosen just for concealment. It might have been part of the design. Big, public, ignored, like the victims themselves. As media attention returned to the case, the public flooded tip lines with theories. A former teacher recalled seeing someone parked along Ashford Road months before Emily vanished. A faded blue pickup truck, always facing the same direction. No plates were recorded. The sighting was logged, but remained inconclusive. Investigators reached out to regional departments with similar cold cases. One case from Indiana, closed years earlier as a likely runaway, was reopened when a journal belonging to the missing girl was discovered to have contained one of the same symbols from Emily's sequence page. And so the threads began pulling tighter. Emily's backpack had not solved her disappearance, but it had brought her back into view, not just as a victim, but as a connection to others, to something larger, something hidden in plain sight. The more investigators examined the artifacts from Emily's backpack, the clearer it became. This was not just about her disappearance. It was about a structure, a cycle. Someone had been watching, choosing, and marking teenagers who fit a specific profile, and the objects left behind or not left behind were part of a long, quiet narrative that nobody had seen forming. Detective Lena Harrow now worked alongside a behavioral analyst from the Michigan Bureau of Investigation. Together, they compiled a timeline of the disappearances referenced in Emily's backpack. One name stood out. Colin Bear, 17, vanished in 2004 while biking home from a volunteer job. His case had gone cold within months. No suspect, no belongings found. Until now, one of the clippings found in Emily's bag was of Colin's case. Folded carefully, the headline circled in black ink. Colin's mother was contacted. She had never heard of Emily Price. But when asked if anything unusual had occurred during her son's investigation, she mentioned something odd. A man who showed up at their door 2 weeks after the disappearance, asking vague questions about Colin's interests, what he read, whether he kept a journal, if he ever talked about walking instead of biking. He claimed to be with a nonprofit that worked with missing teens. But no such organization existed. No badge, no name. Just a clipboard and polite demeanor. She hadn't reported it. At the time, people came and went all the time. Everyone wanted to help. Now it felt different. The team searched old incident logs. Nothing surfaced about that visit, but the behavior fit a new theory forming behind the scenes. Someone had been conducting soft interviews, watching families, collecting stories, and curating their own timeline of disappearances, long before the cases ever gained traction. Back in Grand Rapids, the Billboard site was cordoned off again. Investigators wanted to inspect the ground beneath it. What they found shocked them. About 2 feet beneath the base of the support column, buried in a weathered plastic box, was a second sealed package. Inside, laminated articles, different from the ones in Emily's backpack. These were not about disappearances. They were about memorials, candlelight vigils, missing person awareness days, photos of benches, plaques, street corner shrines. Someone had collected records not just of the losses, but of how the public remembered them. And in the center of the package, placed with eerie symmetry, was a printed photo of the very billboard now under excavation, taken at night, with a blurry silhouette visible in the foreground, too dark to identify. The timestamp, March 3rd, 2008, 7:42 p.m., 4 hours after Emily vanished. Digital enhancement couldn't clarify the figure, but the photo's existence proved one thing. Someone had returned to the Billboard site the night Emily disappeared and took a picture of it. Why? To document the moment? To record that the placement had occurred? Was it a ritual? A process? Or something worse? An attempt to mark the culmination of plan? Analysts began referring to this theory as the archivist. A possible subject, gender unknown, age unknown, who followed missing teen cases across the Midwest for over a decade, collecting newspaper clippings, recording sites, hiding personal objects in specific places, and cataloging the public's reactions. It wasn't about taking. It was about recording the taking. Emily, they now believed, may have been lured, not forced. Perhaps she met someone near the school, someone who spoke calmly, someone who knew about her sketches, who showed her symbols, who made her feel like part of something bigger, someone who invited her to participate in a mystery without telling her it was her own. One sheet in her backpack had a hand-drawn map. It showed Ashford Road. But unlike a normal street map, it was distorted, as if redrawn from memory or from a child's perspective. On it, several shapes were marked. Trees, a bench, the billboard, but also a small X near a drain pipe just past a bend. When investigators checked the area in 2018, the drain pipe had long since corroded and been replaced. But city maintenance records showed that back in 2008, that section of sidewalk had been dug up for routine sewer work, which meant someone knew the landscape intimately, not just where Emily walked, but where people wouldn't look. Someone who paid attention to maintenance schedules, to seasonal changes, to public blind spots. An archivist. Over the next 6 months, tips came in from all over the state. People remembered strange vans, flyers, odd conversations, but no names, no faces. The case drew national attention for a brief time. Emily's face returned to digital billboards, now ironically the most visible element of her entire story. A documentary crew filmed a short feature about her disappearance, the backpack, and the theory of the archivist. But the central mystery remained. Why return the backpack at all? Detective Harrow believed it wasn't guilt, nor recklessness. It was intention, a way to mark the 10th anniversary, to close a cycle. Whoever had hidden that backpack behind the billboard knew it would eventually be found, but only after enough time had passed. Just like the newspaper clippings, just like the photo of the vigil, just like the symbols in the sketch pad. Everything pointed to someone building a structure out of time, waiting between acts, hiding just long enough to be forgotten before resurfacing again. Emily was part of that structure now, but so was the silence. 10 years after Emily Price vanished, her backpack emerged from behind a billboard like a sealed message. Not a cry for help, but a puzzle, one that investigators, her family, and an entire community would spend years trying to decipher. It didn't end with the backpack. In early 2019, 9 months after its discovery, a maintenance crew in Fremont, Ohio, just over 200 miles from Grand Rapids, was deconstructing an old train platform canopy. Tucked deep inside a sealed electrical panel, they found something odd, a Ziploc bag wrapped in insulation foam. Inside were 4 objects: a laminated newspaper clipping, a pencil sharpener, a single shoelace, and a folded paper napkin with the initials EP written faintly in blue ink. The newspaper clipping was from 2003, another missing teen. The pencil sharpener matched a model sold exclusively at Michigan school supply stores in 2007. And the initials? No way to confirm authenticity. But the coincidence was too sharp to ignore. For Detective Lena Harrow and her team, it was a confirmation, not of who, but of what. This wasn't local. It wasn't random. Someone had been placing items across state lines, over years, in forgotten, decomposing corners of public structures, not hiding trophies, not leaving evidence, marking time. Each item found mirrored something absent in one of the cold cases. The Fremont discovery was added to the growing evidence wall in the Grand Rapids task room, next to Emily's backpack, the photo of the billboard silhouette, and the map with the small X. That room now looked more like a museum than a case file. And perhaps that was the point. This wasn't about escape. It wasn't about ransom. It was about remembering, but on the archivist's terms. The silence that had followed Emily's disappearance had not been accidental. It had been designed. Every action, from the wrapping material to the placement site, was deliberate. The materials used were low-tech, analog, difficult to trace. The clues left behind didn't point to a person. They pointed to a concept, a structure built on disappearance as message. And yet, within all that control, something human remained. Emily's sketch pad, her drawings, the fact that her name remained written in her own hand, unaltered, clear. It suggested that even if someone had taken her or influenced her path, part of Emily stayed present, not erased, not discarded. Her mother chose to believe that. "I think she left those drawings for us," she told a local reporter. "I think she knew someone would find them." In 2020, the city of Grand Rapids completed construction on a small memorial plaza near the base of the old Billboard site. It features a curved steel bench, a circular plaque bearing the names of local missing persons, and a transparent panel that replicates one of Emily's sketches etched in glass. No reference to theories, no mention of the archivist, just her art and space to sit. 1 year later, The task force quietly concluded its operations. No suspect was ever identified. The case remained open but inactive unless new evidence surfaced. The sketch of the sequence page, with 5 boxes, the shoe, notebook, clock, billboard, and empty space, still hangs on a bulletin board in Harrow's office. She sometimes stares at that final empty square, the one Emily never filled in, or maybe wasn't allowed to. Was it meant to represent Emily herself, or was it a placeholder for the next one? That question has kept the case alive in the background of the public's mind, if not always in the headlines. To this day, no confirmed sighting of Emily has occurred. Her Social Security number remains inactive, her bank account untouched. No fingerprint matches, no data traces, no clear conclusion. But something changed after the backpack was found. Not in the outcome, but in the tone. Emily Price was no longer just a vanished teenager. She was a chapter in a pattern, a signal that someone had been watching, recording, choosing. And though that person was never caught, their archive had been breached. The moment the backpack was unwrapped, the structure cracked. And now, wherever the archivists may be, if they still exist, they know this. We saw what you left behind, and we're still looking.